You booked it, episode 179. What's going on, everyone? Thank you for joining me today on You Booked It, the #1 podcast where you learn how to create a successful entertainment career. Every episode is a masterclass on how to move your career forward. Do you want to take your career to the next level? As a listener of this podcast, I am offering you the opportunity to work one-on-one with me to build the foundation of what you need to create a successful career in today's world. Regardless if you're starting out or you've been doing this a while, I've got you covered. Look, when I entered this industry, I went to the #1 school in the USA for musical theater, graduated with an insane skill set, and zero clue about how to actually make my skills a career. I lost years of momentum because of it. Do not let this happen to you. That's why I created this podcast. That's why I'm making you this offer to coach with me. If you're interested, simply tap the link in the description of this episode and let's chat. Okay, let's get started. I am excited to introduce my guest today, Andy Portelli. Are you ready for this, Andy?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Andy's career has spanned more than 15 years performing around the globe. His first major breakthrough was landing a 12-month acting contract for Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg's The Pacific, filming in far north Queensland and Melbourne, Australia, as a U.S. Marine soldier in a 10-part miniseries. He then studied full-time performing arts at Industry Dance. After graduating, Andy began his first dance contract as a production dancer for Princess Cruises. After Ships, he was off to Singapore, where he was a principal lead in a multi-million-dollar production of Lightseeker. Soon after, he booked a singer-dancer contract for Universal Studios Singapore, which concluded his performing career. Now he looks after casting and finds new talent through one of Melbourne's most reputable corporate entertainment companies, Rutherford Entertainment. Andy, that is a quick intro of who you are and what you've done, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Fill in the gaps, and a little bit more about what you do as a professional in the entertainment industry.
Sure. So I was born and raised in Melbourne, Australia, and I was actually the black sheep of the family. My family was very sport orientated, and I was the one that wanted to perform. I was always involved in the school productions, and I remember I was in the school production of Guys and Dolls, and I was playing Nathan Detroit, and the girl that was playing Adelaide had been performing all her life, and she just so happened to have her agent come into the audience and watch the production. And sure enough, I got approached after the show, which was quite exciting. Yeah, and that's how I started my performance journey. I signed up to the agency, and it wasn't until I finished high school when I started taking dance lessons. So I was quite late to the party. I was 18 years old when I started dancing. Yeah, and now I look after casting and finding new talent for a company that I work for. So I get to work alongside some really incredible, talented artists. It's exciting.
Brilliant. I also didn't start dancing or performing anything really until 17 and a half, 18
Yeah.
years old. I did sports. I played the sports, and then
Yeah.
injuries took me out, and then here I am singing and dancing. So much prefer it this way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's move on to this first section here. And Andy, look, I am a sucker for a good quote. What is your favorite quote you'd like to share with everyone?
I love good quotes as well. So my favorite is "Your time will come." And I absolutely love this quote so much because it really does force you to stop comparing your journey to others. I think it's so easy to do that. Some people's time comes earlier than others, but if you continuously work on your craft and you focus on yourself, the universe will provide an opportunity. And I truly believe the universe isn't that cruel. If you work hard on yourself and your skill set and you continuously do that, something will present itself. So yeah, my
For
favorite
sure.
quote is "Your time will come." Yeah.
Yes, and it's not just that the opportunity will present itself, it's that you'll be prepared for when that opportunity presents itself.
Absolutely. That's very important. Yeah.
For sure. They go hand in hand, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I believe, you're supposed to be where you are in life, depending on your life experience and, again, being prepared for that moment. So, yeah, it does go hand in hand. It really does.
Great. Well, let's dig into this first section here. And Andy, of course, you're an entertainment professional. I'm an entertainment professional. And I think that you'd agree that this industry can be one of the most subjective, brutally honest, and emotional industries in existence. And you know as well as I that in order to create and have a successful career in this industry like you're having now takes a lot of dedication and hard work. And while, yeah, there's an outrageous amount of fun and fulfillment and excitement doing what we do, there are also our fair share of obstacles, challenges, and failures we are going to experience and we're going to have to move forward through. So tell us, what is one key challenge, obstacle, or failure you've experienced in your career? And how did you come out the other side better because of it?
Yeah, sure. So, apart from being so hard on myself, and I'm sure every performer's their own worst critic, for me personally, it was always my height. I'm 5'4", and this was always my biggest challenge when I was constantly auditioning. There's just not enough work in Australia to have a continuous, ongoing working career. So you do find that a lot of Aussies go to every audition that is happening, whether it's a musical, a cruise ship, or a theme park. When I was younger, I was, constantly going to these auditions and I'd be making it to the end, but then I'd be told that I wouldn't either fit into the costumes or I wouldn't be able to partner because the girls would be taller than me once they put on their heels on. You do develop a tough skin over time, but I do remember this particular audition. I'd been there all day, made it to the end, and they pulled me aside and they praised me and they said how much they love me, but they couldn't offer me anything because I just wouldn't fit into the costumes. And I remember leaving that audition with such a brave face. And then once I got into my car, I just broke down because it was a factor that I couldn't change. If it was because I wasn't flexible enough or I need to work on my technique, that was something that I was able to go away and work on and perfect. But because it was a factor that I physically couldn't change, it was just a wall that I hit that day. And I remember I just got into my car and I just broke down and I was vulnerable for a moment. And it's okay to be vulnerable. I know, it's until you get older, when you gain some life experience and maturity, that I then realized that I wasn't going to be right for every role, but I was going to be right for more specific roles. And it wasn't until I worked this out that things started presenting themselves to me. And that's when I started booking gigs. Yeah. So until I did that mind shift, that's when things started working in my favor. So I turned a negative into a positive.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm so glad that you shared that journey because it's a crazy world. It's a crazy industry that so much of how and why we book a job is so far out of our control. It is those physical things that you can't go work on those. You are who you are, right? But
Absolutely.
the fact that look, I think we all at some point, it's one thing to talk about it, of course, and having the knowledge and being prepared and having a podcast like this where we can, you can share stories like this. It's really fantastic. But ultimately, you're going to experience those things yourself when you go into those rooms, whatever your thing is, right, that you can't change about yourself, that just didn't work for a producer or a casting agent. And it's tough to have that, but it's so wonderful to have experiences like yours being shared here because you found the mindset switch and you go, look, I had to realize I'm not right for everything.
That's right.
That when I realized that and I really embraced that, well, that's when things started coming around. That's when the opportunities started showing up, and those were the things that you were good for. The things that were your Achilles heel, to say, in one audition is now your greatest strength, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's so important to have made that switch.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember going into the audition for Light Seeker and the casting director asked me, he said, "How tall are you?" And I was actually hesitant in saying my true height. I was like, oh, do I add a couple of inches here or do I just be honest? And he could tell on my face that I was insecure about answering the question. And he said, "No, honestly, it's okay." And I said, I'm short. I'm 5'3", 5'4". And he was like, "That's fine." And that in that situation actually worked in my favor because the role that they were looking at me for required to be short, So I
Yeah.
think when you're young and naive, you want to put yourself out there and you're gun ho about landing a contract. And like I said, like I was going to every audition and I knew that I wasn't right for things that I was going for. But yeah, it's until you get older and wiser that you work out that yeah, you are not going to be the perfect fit for every show. Yeah, I think it's important to sit down and work out what you are going to be right for. It actually saves you a lot of time as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those things that I actually coach and talk about. I was actually speaking with Kent State University
Mm,
to loads of their performing arts and acting students over in Ohio the other day, virtually, of course.
mm,
And I was telling them, like, look, the one thing that I like to tell everyone when they're starting out in this career, or even if you've started professionally, is to ask yourself, what is it you actually want out of your career?
yeah, sure.
Get super clear on that. And the more clear you can get on that, that really helps direct you in what you're going to pursue because this industry is crazy. Just even within, say, musical theater, there's a million
Mm,
directions you can go, you know?
that's right.
So get clear on what you want and you save all that time. You can get efficient about how you spend your time and the way you work.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to know that your goals change as you do get older.
Mm,
My goals from when I was a fresh 18-year-old coming out of high school wanting to pursue a career in the performing arts industry, my goals have changed since then, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with your goals evolving over time. I think people need to realize that as well, because I know I was so hard on myself when I was going through the shift. I actually had a major injury in Singapore when I was doing light sacre. I pinched the nerve in my neck and I was hospitalized. And it wasn't until that moment where I was like, I need to work out what else I'm going to be able to do in this industry because I wanted to be in this industry. I've always known that if I wasn't performing, I still wanted to be involved in some capacity.
yeah.
And that moment when I remember I was laying in hospital, I was like, okay, I need to think about my future here because this may be it. This may be my last performing contract. And thank God it wasn't. But my goals had changed as I got older, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you've failed. I think that's so important because again, we're so
Yeah.
hard on ourselves, and never compare yourself to other people's journeys. I can't stress that enough. It's
Yeah,
so
for
detrimental to your
sure.
own mental health as well.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And that has come up quite a few times actually throughout interview process of
Mm,
don't compare yourself. It's pointless. It's really just a toxic place to be. You for motivation, sure, but that certainly also there's a fine line, to ride there.
absolutely.
And it's okay to be motivated and inspired, but to go the other side of that knife's edge can be it's very easy to do, and it can be very detrimental. But I'm also really glad that you brought up, my priorities changed a little bit. I had
Hmm.
to reassess my career, and so happy to have you on the show because you have made that transition successfully through your career, and that's so important for everyone listening to hear because a lot of us entertainers, we know physically we
Mm,
aren't going to be able to do this job until we're 90 years old or something like this.
that's
So
right. Yeah.
how do we make that transition successfully and to give
Mm.
I'm so glad you just gave the permission to do that to everyone because it's so important that you do take that on, and it's okay to reassess, and you can still find that creative artistic fulfillment in other parts of this industry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's so important. And there are other avenues. For me, I always thought that I wanted to be performing up until I'm a very old man. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, I did have that injury and it is long lasting. And I really did need to think about where I was going in my life's path. And there are opportunities out there. There's actually so many different avenues of the industry that many people don't even consider or really know about. Melbourne has such a huge corporate event scene where performers are able to work regularly in the corporate industry. Music theatre is very scarce in comparison to America and the West End, the UK. So you do find that a lot of Australians are doing corporate entertainment on the weekends. Obviously, COVID paused everything, but now that things
Yeah,
are
yeah,
picking,
yeah.
yeah, things are picking back up here in Australia, which is fantastic. And we've gone from 0 to 100. Yeah, there's plenty of opportunity in the entertainment field that isn't performing. And for me, I was lucky that I found a job where I'm able to scout new talent and do casting, which is something I'm hugely passionate about. Because I've also been a performer, I'm able to understand where the performer comes from. And when they walk into the audition room and they are auditioning for us, I totally understand what they're going through mentally and the excitement, the nerves, the adrenaline, everything. So I think also being a performer, I do still perform every now and then, just that's not my focus now. I'm able to empathize, and I can understand where they're coming from. So yeah, it doesn't mean if you're not performing, it doesn't mean that you're not successful at all. Anything in life, things happen for a reason. Yeah.
Well said. And let's move on to a time that I like to call your spotlight moment. That one moment in time you realized, yes, I am going to be an entertainer for a living. Or maybe it was, yes, this is what I need to be doing as an entertainer. Tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. So I actually can't say that I have a spotlight moment because I've always wanted to be a performer from as young as I can remember. You know, when adults ask you, oh, what do you want to be when you're older? My answer was always, I want to be an actor. And that was always my answer from as young as I can remember. And my parents have baby footage of me, you know, crawling over to our 80s sound system and pulling myself up and bopping up and down. I couldn't even walk, but I would pull myself up and I'd be bopping up and down to whatever track that I'd be playing on their record player. Yeah, I think I've always had it in my blood that I wanted to perform. I was always involved in the school musicals and all the productions. So for me, there was no particular spotlight moment. I do remember seeing my first ever musical, which was Reis. And I remember after watching that, I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. So maybe that was my spotlight moment. Maybe that was just the icing on the cake.
Yeah, there it is. The stamp of validation. You're like, yep,
absolutely.
I was right this whole time.
That's right.
Great. And let's piggyback on that real quick and talk about your number one booked it moment. Walk us through that day, the auditions and callbacks, if they happen to be a part of it. What was going on in your life? And what about that moment makes it your favorite booked it moment?
Oh, okay. So my number one booked it moment would definitely have to be when I landed my first major contract, and that was for the Pacific. And I remember I had 3 callbacks. I had to also submit a self-tape. And I actually had really long hair at the time. And I remember going into my second callback and the casting director asked me if I was willing to shave my head. And naturally, I just said yes straight away without even thinking twice. But it wasn't until I walked out of the audition and it sort of hit me and I was like, what if I do get another callback? I'm going to have to shave my head. And my hair back then was like my pride and joy. Sure enough, I got the final callback. So I walked into that final callback with a shaved head. I did it. I went down to the hairdressers and I was like, yep, let's do it. Yeah. And yeah, I remember how old was I? I was 19 at the time. So I'd only been dancing for 12 months and I was at my local performing arts studio where they were holding a part-time course and they had some of like Melbourne's most well-known choreographers taking classes. And it just so happened that the performing arts studio that was there was where my agent was based. And I was in a class and my agent came down and he asked the teacher to stop the music. And he said he had an announcement to make. And we're all looking at each other. And sure enough, some of my closest friends were also in the class. And all he said was, Andy, you did it. And it's just a memory that I'll never forget. I was so elated, all that hard work. And it was months of auditioning back and forth. And I shaved my head for it. And I got a role, in the Pacific, which is something that I'll never forget. It was an absolutely incredible experience.
That is amazing. And can you talk just a little bit about being on set, doing that, working with Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg?
Yeah, so it stemmed from their first production, Band of Brothers, and it was filming in far north Queensland, which is just such a beautiful location in Australia. If you ever do get to go, definitely check it out because it is beautiful, the Great Barrier Reef up there. I got to film up in far north Queensland for 3 months. It was very demanding. We had to do an intensive 10-day boot camp with real US Marine soldiers to get us into character and understand how to hold a weapon and really get into their frame of mind of what the war was like, sleeping with one eye open all the time. So that was an experience that was mentally and physically challenging without saying the least. So that was a couple of weeks of intense military training. And then, we got to film over 12 months. We relocated back into Melbourne where we shot majority of the production. Got to meet Tom Hanks personally when we were in far north Queensland. And that was an experience. He's very passionate about these events that happened in our time. So that was, again, that's a moment that I will never, ever forget. And we got to work with some amazing US actors that I see constantly in film and TV now, which is a spin out. I also love that when we were training, doing boot camp, that they threw us all in there together. We had no idea who was playing what. We were all treated equally. There was no hierarchy. We all ate rations. We all wore the same uniform. We all got treated the same. Yeah, I definitely came out of that a different person, without a doubt.
Wow.
It's something that, I'm so grateful for. And something that I'm able to understand what the generations before us went through. Understand we're going through something completely tragic right now with COVID-19 coronavirus, but to endure a war and to take part in that is just something that you can't even fathom. And I understand that I was portraying, I was acting, I was telling the story of what happened in our time of the Pacific War. We also got to meet some veterans and their stories that, like, I'll take them to the grave. There's something that I've got so much respect for them and the people that have gone through that. So that was a real beautiful life lesson too, without a doubt.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. And let's take a moment to talk about the present. What projects have you got going on right now? What are you looking forward to? And, we've mentioned it a bit, this crazy pandemic. How do you see the entertainment industry moving forward in the next couple of years?
Sure. So it's unfortunate that the entertainment and the events industry was the first one to go when all of this happened. I do see it slowly coming back. I really do hope that people get behind us, without a doubt. I know for other countries it's happening a lot slower than what it's happening here in Australia. We seem to have things under control, which is really great. Now I look after talent and I'm constantly, scouting new talent, holding auditions, and which is something I'm truly passionate about. And I love that I'm able to provide work for performers. I'm able to give back now, which is great. Like I said earlier, a lot of performers in Australia are able to work frequently because of our corporate scene, especially in Melbourne. A lot of Australian performers go overseas for the work. That's why I went to Singapore, fell in love with the country when I did Light Seeker, and then I auditioned for Universal because, the country's beautiful. But for me now, it's focusing on being able to provide work for performers in Australia worldwide. We provide work all over Australia, which is fantastic. Melbourne's our base, but we do get inquiries for Australia and sometimes overseas at the moment. Obviously, that's on hold due to the borders and whatnot.
Yep.
But for me, it's working on the other side of entertainment, which is great. It's given me a whole new insight to how things work behind the scenes. Things that I didn't know when I was performing.
Awesome. And it is time now to move on to one of my favorite sections in the interview. I call it the Grease Lightning Round. I am going to ask you a handful of questions. I want you to answer them as quickly and concisely as possible, one after another. Are you ready?
I'm so ready. Let's do it.
All right, first question. What was the one thing holding you back from committing to a career as an entertainer?
Insecurities and the fear of failure. Again, we're so hard on ourselves naturally, as this industry is so brutal. But until, maturity hit me, I was able to be content and satisfied with my successes and my journey.
Second question. What is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
I love this. Don't take it personally. You may be the missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle, or you might be the piece that doesn't fit. And again, don't take it personally. I auditioned for the Australian tour West Side Story, just a quick story. And they were looking for a cover to play both a shark and a jet. And it was between me and one other guy. And it came down to the fact that I looked too European to play a jet. I've got European heritage in my blood, so I've got the dark skin and dark hair. And again, there was nothing that I could have done about that. It didn't mean that my talent wasn't up to standard for the show. It was purely my look. So don't take it personally.
There it is. I mean, there's an example of it working out on the performance side, but then we're listening to Andy here, and he's in casting now. He does this. So
That's right.
He's telling you from his perspective as a casting agent that it really isn't personal.
That's right.
And you can still be beautiful and wonderful at what you do, but if it's not the right fit, that's all it is. Nothing beyond that.
Absolutely. And I see it like a jigsaw puzzle. And that's why I use that analogy about the missing piece or the piece that doesn't fit. Essentially, you are finding the pieces to the jigsaw puzzle, right? And if you are not right for that piece of the puzzle, you may be right for the next one. And if you did such a great audition, we're going to remember you for the next opportunity that comes up. So that's my little piece of advice.
Yeah, beautiful. Fantastic. Mm-hmm. And the third question, what is something that is working for you right now? Or if you'd like to go pre-COVID, what was working for you before our industry went on pause?
Sure. So I always think there's an opportunity to start learning a new craft. And for me, I knew that I wanted to migrate to the other side of entertainment, but I didn't want to fully give up performing entirely. So when I was at Universal Studios in Singapore, I wanted to find some work-life balance. So I actually started taking up DJ lessons over there, and I was working with one of Singapore's like leading club DJs, and I was in there once a week, and I was learning a new skill. And then, sure enough, COVID hit, and Melbourne went into such a huge, strict lockdown that went on for months. So I took that opportunity to hone in on those skills, and now that things are picking back up, I'm actually gigging professionally as a DJ on the weekends for corporate events. So although I'm not performing on stage, I'm still performing. So there is never a moment where you can't start up a new skill. It doesn't matter how old you are. Yeah. So for me, what's working for me now is that I've learned a new skill and I'm taking it with both hands and I'm running with it.
Yeah, brilliant. I love that.
Yeah.
And the fourth question, what is your best resource? Whether that is a book, a movie, maybe a YouTube video or podcast, maybe a piece of technology that you've found is helping your career right now.
Yeah, sure. So the resources available today is incredible. I wish what is available now is what we had back then, like this podcast, for instance. I think it's fantastic to hear people's stories and realize that we're all human. It doesn't matter what you've done in life, what role you've played, but the fact that there is available resources like a podcast and interviewing people is fantastic. For me, social media is huge, especially when I'm looking for new talent. I can easily jump on talent's profiles and I treat it like a digital portfolio, and I can see what they're doing if they've posted any performance clips or, you know, how they perform or what they might be like as a person. And it's so easy to contact them through social media now, whereas back in the day, it was harder. But yeah, social media obviously has its pros and cons. You can fall into the rabbit hole and compare your journey to others, which is very important to make sure that you're mentally aware of. But for me, when I am looking for new talent, I do hop on social media. It's easily accessible. So remember to treat your profile like a digital portfolio because it is important.
Yes, very well said. I've been saying this for years, and now it just keeps coming out again and again and again and more that, yes, social media is your, like you said, your running portfolio, your running resume, if you will, that it's used as a resource to learn about what it is you do. And it's easier than just reading a resume, just some text, right? Because it's more, you can see the content, right? You have video and photos. It's much better than just reading a resume. So you have to treat it like it is, like it's a serious tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can gauge them as a person, which is so important because you could be the most talented person, but if you're hard to work with, well, then that's a huge factor that goes into having a long-lasting relationship between a performer and the person that is hiring you. If you are a pleasure to work with, that's going to be so much more outstanding because I remember when I was training in full-time, the course director would always say, as harsh as it may sound, everyone is replaceable. and if you are hard to work with, then that's going to be a problem. So, yeah, just remember that your social media profile is able to tell us what you're like as a person. Be a nice person. Be a nice person in life.
Good advice right there.
Right.
And the fifth question, if you had to start your career from scratch, but you still had all the knowledge and experience you've collected from your career in this industry, what would you do or not do? Would you do anything differently, or would you keep it the same?
Yeah, because I started dancing at 18, I felt like I had to really work on that craft because I had no dance technique. I just had natural flexibility just from being a kid and playing sport. But I actually neglected my singing because I was so concerned about not having danced since I was 18 years old. So it wasn't until I was older that I then flipped it and I shifted my focus to the singing. So I would say to my younger self, give equal attention to all crafts of performing, acting, singing, dancing. I even did acrobatics because I was so short. I was like, okay, what else is going to get me through the audition process? If they do ask me, does anyone have any acro skills? I would say just work on your craft equally across all aspects: singing, dancing, acting, acrobatics, which seems to be very important in this day and age as well. You need to be a threat, not a triple threat, a quadruple threat.
Honestly. Oh, everyone can flip now. Everyone can do a handful of cool things. It's the way
right.
it is.
That's exactly right.
And the last question, what is the golden nugget knowledge drop you've learned from your successful career that you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Yeah, sure. As simple as your journey is your journey. Don't compare your successes to others. That's it. Plain and simple.
Brilliant. So good. And to wrap up this interview, Andy, it is time to give yourself a plug. Where can we find you? How do our listeners connect with you? Is there anything you want to promote?
Sure. So you can find me on Instagram. My handle is Andy Portelli. Or if you are talent in Australia, whether you're a DJ, musician, singer, dancers, you can hit me up at andy@rutherfordentertainment.com.au and we can go from there.
Beautiful. And for everyone listening out there, I have put the links to everything Andy just said into the description of this episode so you can easily get connected with him. And also be sure to share this podcast with your fellow entertainers, coaches, teachers, arts and entertainment educators, and anyone you know aspiring to create a career in this industry. You Booked It is the #1 resource of expertise on how to actually create a successful entertainment career. Case in point, everything Andy shared with us today, really bridging the gap between the performance and the casting side of this industry. Such great information that you can take away right now. If you like this episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. Andy, thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad we got connected.
Oh, you're most welcome, and thank you for having me on your podcast. What an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't miss an episode. Every guest drops more value and insight than any other resource out there, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love to hear from you. Leave us a rating and review. Also, be sure to head over to youbookeditpodcast.com and join our free email community where we dig deep into a continually growing resource of truly actionable things you can be doing right now to help you advance your entertainment career. All the best to you.